Okay, so we are all right. The plan is like this. Plan is to do the continuing with Mishlei on Tuesday. Okay, because I'm not so in the mood to do Mishlei today, and I mean I'm in the mood, but I'm not in the headspace to do Mishlei today. And also that will allow us to keep our uh, to start a new pasuk on Wednesday. And also give the weekend to think about it. So I do want to do Q&A, but I was actually on the way over listening to something from Rabbi Moskowitz, and I actually wanted to share this and then talk about it. So this is not available online. This is a secret trove of Rabbi Moskowitz recordings from I think 2011. And one of the qualities of Rabbi Moskowitz that you can talk about, but it's very, very hard to actually I'm going to talk about it, and you're going to feel like you've met people like this, but you haven't. Because I would just verbally, I would describe a lot of people like this, but there's something about the extent to which he embodied this quality that is unparalleled in my mind. And the quality is that he lived entirely by his mind. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that he made only intellectual decisions and no emotional decisions. What I mean is that you could not sway him based on anything based on authority. Okay. It had to make sense to him, and I'll explain what I mean, but I want to share it in Rabbi Moskowitz's words, and then and then if you have questions, we can just let me know. We can pause throughout. It's not a very long thing. Sorry, hold on a second. So he introduces it with the notion of a Bas Kol. Okay, and I'm playing it on my phone because whenever I play audio on Zoom and with the TV, it's always unpredictable. So first of all, tell me if you can give me a thumbs up if you can hear this.
There are two times in the Gemara that I know that they talk about a Bas Kol, a voice from heaven. Okay? One is there was
Yeah, Isaac?
Sorry, I just missed the context for this.
Nope.
No,
did you hear me say the context just now that this is a quality about Rabbi Moskowitz I want to talk about?
I didn't hear the quality you wanted.
Okay.
I was like,
your connection is really bad. I'm not going to try to have this conversation. Hopefully you can hear us. Okay.
Difference in there are two times in the Gemara that I know that they talk about a Bas Kol, a voice from heaven. Okay, one is there was a difference in different opinions about a certain halacha, and one man said that if I'm right, let a voice from heaven or a Bas Kol come out from heaven to say I'm right, and a voice from heaven came out and said he is right, and the other guy stood up and he said, Lo b'shamayim he. The halachic system is not in heaven; it's given over to man, and so therefore the Bas Kol. I'm not going to listen to the Bas Kol. We're not going to listen to the voice of heaven, but I must go according to the system, and the system is that we have to paskin, and I think we make a decision like this guy against the Bas Kol. So the question is, what did the Bas Kol lie? The answer is the Bas Kol did not lie, but the Bas Kol was saying what God said on Mount Sinai. Okay?
That's the actual Gemara says Afrei Rabbi Lahatos, right? That you follow the majority, right? So, sorry, did I say that wrong? Sorry, that's what the guy said. The Bas Kol was saying that the minority opinion was correct, and then this guy said we go based on what it says at Sinai, which is Afrei Rabbi Lahatos.
But however, the system is that we don't go by heaven anymore after the original transmission, the Masorah. After the original Masorah transmission, then it's given over to human beings. And human beings, sometimes where there's a difference of opinion, we have to make a decision that we call psak. When we make a decision, we don't know what God said on Mount Sinai, but we make a decision on the correct psak, on the correct halacha. So you see, it's an interesting thing that we don't listen to the Bas Kol. Voice from heaven comes out. Strange religion. You know what I mean? That we have to decide whether we're going to accept a voice from heaven.
Yeah, Oren?
Didn't Moshe ask questions to God, like halachic questions to God?
Yeah, so Rabbi Moskowitz is going to touch on this a little bit later, but he's not going to elaborate enough to answer your questions. So to answer your question, so I'll answer it right now, which is that there is a difference between nevuah and a Bas Kol, okay? And there's also a difference between nevuas Moshe and regular nevuah. And so when we say that we accept the Torah and that a Bas Kol can't override the Torah, the only Torah we have is from Moshe Rabbeinu. So we call that Torah's Moshe, you know? And so Moshe, the questions that Moshe was asking God and the answers he received, that constitutes Torah. So the answer is yes, Moshe got answers from God, but that is synonymous with Torah. Any subsequent Navi cannot undermine Moshe, you know? So if any Navi attempts to interfere in the halakhic system as a Navi, meaning if he said, you know, if the Sanhedrin rules this way and the Navi says, no, you should rule that way, or even if the Sanhedrin rules this way and the Navi says, you know, on the authority of Nevuah, that the Sanhedrin is right. So we deem him a false prophet and we execute him. You know, there's no interference at all. And then a Bas Kol is something Rabbi Moskowitz is going to say he doesn't know what it is, and neither do I. But like, you know, if Bas Kol is some sort of form of like, you know, lower level nevuah, it's not even at the level of nevuah. So that certainly can't override stuff. Yeah.
I think part of what I meant though was, why did Moshe even feel the need to ask God though if the Torah was already in his hands, so to speak?
No, the Torah was only, I guess, if you want to use the term ratified, like at the very end. You know, Moshe got all the halachos. Moshe got all of the halachos, you know, from Sinai, but there were continued. Let's say like I guess the clearest case is like the Bnos Tzlafchad, you know, that's in the Torah itself. That Moshe Rabbeinu was asked what the halacha was, or let's say like with the blasphemer or the Makoshes Eitzim, you know, in terms of I forgot which one, they didn't know what punishment it was, so like he had to ask Hashem. So the answers he received then became part of Torah. Yeah, blasphemer. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, so so that's what I mean by like I don't necessarily want to say it was. I mean, I guess fluid is an accurate term. The contents of Torah were not firmly fixed until the very end when Moshe wrote down the actual scrolls.
But God looked into the Torah to build a universe.
Oh, I'm not listening to you. All right, yeah, yeah, okay. Answer your question? I mean, as much as we're going into it, I hope. Okay, let's go on.
There's another Gemara that there was.
This is an interesting one. I feel like the first story people have heard. The second one, I don't know. I certainly don't hear it talked about as much.
A man by the name of Elisha ben Avuya. He was Meir's rebbi. Now they say that Rabbi Meir was the most abstract of all the Tanoim. Okay, Tanoim are the authors of the Mishnah and also a thing called the Brisa. But anyway. So they were great thinkers, but he was the most abstract. And his Rebbe, who was even more abstract, was Elisha ben Avuya, and he went away from God. He turned away. So it says that Elisha ben Avuya heard a Bas Kol, he heard a voice from heaven that said, you can't repent. It says everybody could repent except Elisha ben Avuya. His repentance, he can't repent.
Now, you just got to take a moment to appreciate the experiential reality of what that must have been like if you're in Elisha ben Avuya's shoes and you hear a Bas Kol that says everyone could do tshuva except for you, right? Okay.
So the question is, so look, they said he can't do tshuva, he can't repent, so it's not his fault. So Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the Rav, said that he shouldn't have listened to the Bas Kol. He should have listened to Torah. I don't understand I don't believe a Bas Kol could lie, and what the Bas Kol had in mind, I don't know. But the fact is, the Rav says that he should have listened to Torah. Torah says that everybody could do tshuva, and he shouldn't have listened to the Bas Kol, he should have listened to Torah. So it's a very interesting religion that we have, that the mind is in other words, truth and honesty comes first. And if you can't accept something, then you can't accept it until you understand it, or you can't accept it, and that's it. I mean, we had Abraham that questioned God's justice in Sodom. We have Moshe that questioned him about making Moshe a leader. We have Yonah, the prophet, that put himself in a situation, says he ran away from God. He means he put himself in a situation that he shouldn't receive a prophecy because he disagreed with it. So he sensed what the prophecy was going to be, and he just disagreed with it. So he tried to put himself in a position that he shouldn't receive the prophecy. So you see that you must live by your mind. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting religion. It's not like any other religion that demands that you totally be guided by your mind. I can't define at this point the difference between regular prophecy and a Bas Kol. Okay?
Now,
Prophecy is knowledge from God. It sometimes talks the public prophets that you find in the later prophets. All their prophets is to tell the consequences of your actions of the nation, so they get a chance to repent. But there was private prophecy which helped you develop your knowledge and to move ahead. I don't know. But I don't know exactly how it works, but it was a method of development, of knowledge, of ideas of God, that God helped you.
He's going to make an
One
important
of the ways
qualification in a
was
second.
Bas Kol, was a lower level, and I can't tell you, I don't know the difference. In other words, whenever we hear a prophecy or we study Torah, whatever it is, even if God is speaking to us, we should never submit how we think because of authority, even if the authority is God. I must go by my mind, how my mind sees it. And that's how I must live my life. You understand? That's what it is. I must live my life by wisdom, the way my mind sees it. If I don't understand something from Torah, then I can't accept it. I'm not talking about halacha. Halacha is an action. So even though I don't understand it, I can do the act.
All right, let me elaborate on that because he didn't elaborate on this here. So there are certain Rabbi Moskowitzisms, that he would say a lot. So this distinction between ideas and halacha is a very firm distinction. So he's saying when it comes to ideas, you cannot accept anything unless you understand it. Okay, and at all, right? But when it comes to halacha, then the Rabbi Moskowitzism is God tells me jump, I ask how high. Okay, in other words, you obey halacha completely, even if you don't understand it at all, right? And that's the chazal. It's like even they tell you that your left hand is your right hand. You obey it no matter what. And the reason why you obey it no matter what is because of your mind, because of Torah Sinai, But in the particulars of halacha, then you accept it even if you don't understand it at all, because that's based on action, and you act on that. But when it comes to someone telling you an idea, you can't accept it unless you understand it.
Why isn't that a part of Bas Kol?
So I think he'll address that in the end. We got 2 more minutes, yeah.
But my mind, it's like trying to accept a square circle. You understand? If it's contradictory to the way I think, then I can't accept it in my mind until I clarify it. That's why Avram questioned God until it became clear to him. Moshe questioned God until it became clear to him. You understand? And that we have the right to. The only time Moshe was punished where he didn't have a question and he said, send it in the hands of a messenger. That was his last statement. That's when God punished him. That's when God got angry. Because it wasn't a rational question. It was just a reaction. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like going. I don't feel I should do it. I feel there's people are bad. No, that's not a logical thing. So then you punish for. You see, for saying something irrational, then you're punished.
Okay.
But if you question him rationally, in fact, by Job, one of the arguments he uses against his 3 friends that come to argue with him, he says, I'm closer to God than you are, because you're just trying to be apologetic for God, to give answers that are just apologetic, that don't make sense. But I see a real question. And since I see a real question, so I'm closer to the truth than you are, even if I don't have the answer. So therefore, I'm closer to God. By definition, if you're living the life of Chachma, then you're closer to God. But going back to Elisha ben Avuya, the Torah says that everybody could repent.
Okay.
Okay, and now here at a Bas Kol that said that you can't repent, right?
Right.
So he has a contradiction between Torah and the Bas Kol.
So go with Torah.
So the Rav held that he was wrong for not going by Torah and listen to the voice, to listen to prophecy.
Really?
Yeah, that's what the Rav holds.
Okay.
Yeah. So regarding your question, I mean, I think the best analogy could be like where if let's say a scientist has to be beholden to the data, right? So like you certainly have to analyze the data in terms of your mind, with your mind, but like you cannot deny the actual data, like the actual observations, right? So Sinai, and the Pesukim of the Torah, because it was based on what our eyes saw and our ears heard, it has that status in terms of the hierarchy of knowledge of like, it's like what we are witnessing with our own eyes. And so if the Torah says, Achrei Rabim Lahatos, or like everyone could do tshuva, so then you can't, then it's nice that there's a Bas Kol, but like I have to give priority to to my senses.
Wasn't that also your senses?
No, it's not. That's what I'm saying is like the Bas Kol might be something that, like a Bas Kol is authority. That's really the way he's setting it up here. Like a Bas Kol is someone telling you that something is the case. Torah is something that you've witnessed is the case, and that you can't override. Yeah, Chaim?
Yeah, I mean, when you said that the Torah tells you to go like bust a rope, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that just how we paskin Darabanan? Meaning like there's a machlok between the Chachamim and Rabbi Meir about that. And Meir's Chodesh Yuta, and the Chachamim say that we go bust a rope.
I mean, all I know is that Torah. I mean, we paskin. Yeah, we paskin that
So,
you go.
so when you say Torah, you mean like?
Yeah.
Just to clarify terms,
Yeah.
are we creating a distinction or differentiation between Torah and halakha?
In what way?
In that it seems like part of the ways in which Torah is being described,
Yeah.
I think by you and by Rabbi Moskowitz, is more of a like certain concepts and ideals versus halakha is a practical application of certain things in which you're supposed to do, which may not necessarily be in line with or encompassing of those ideals, or they may be applications of those ideals, but they are not particularly those ideals.
Yeah, I do think he is using the terms in two different ways, and I think if you asked him like to define what he is included in each one, I don't think he'd be able to do it. So it's a good question about like what the parameters of this thing are. Like I would say, for example, Achrei Rabim Lahatos is an actual halacha. It's an actual pasuk. It's in it's Torah Peh tells us how to implement it. The statement that everyone could do tshuva, I mean, that's like a reality that we're taught from Torah, but like I wouldn't equate that with Achrei Rabim Lahatos, Yeah. So I don't know where to draw that line.
So are we gonna think about like this question?
I like thinking.
All right, awesome. All right, good. So, I mean, it seems like the main question over here is like what's like. I mean, what's the difference between like the whole system of the Torah from from.
Oh, you mean the question Sean just asked, or which question? What do you mean?
I'm not really sure what Sean was asking because he was.
Okay, so you ask your question, and
there's a system of the Torah where you have like from Karsina all the way down to Halakha, with like a precedent going back and forth, and there's like this Bas Kol, which is somewhere like it's claiming from Torah Messiah, but at the same time it has no legitimate backbone because it's some external something. Right. It's like that's just like I'm trying to figure out. Like,
so I think it's easier to describe what the Bas Kol is than what Torah is. Bas Kol is like a statement that is made about what the truth is, but it's coming from authority. And I'll give you an analogy, and this is what I want to try to like. It's impossible to fully depict this, but like very frequent experience would be you're having a discussion with Rabbi Moskowitz, and he would be saying a certain idea, and then you would say, but Rabbi Moskowitz, the Rambam says blah, 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 or like Rabbi Chait says blah, 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 or whatever. Not phased at all. He would ask you, what does that mean? Like, and if you could explain it to him, then the discussion would be about the idea. But if you would be like, yeah, and then you're like trying to but the Rambam says explicitly that blah, blah, blah. It would be like he just didn't care. He only cared about it insofar as like getting the understanding. And when you're in the realm of understanding, we could talk, but like quoting authority is not going to help. So I think with the Bas Kol, it has the standing of like the utmost authority. Like in that story about the ovens of Achnai, like it was God saying that the minority opinion was the opinion that was given at Sinai, Yeah.
There's a follow-up question.
Yeah.
All right, so the reality is like he is an authority, right? Just like
Yeah.
the Rambam and just like
Yeah.
Moshe, like that's
The Bas Kol you're saying.
The Bas Kol.
Yeah.
So now the question is they're saying something, right? Now we don't have to go by what they're saying based on authority. We can go by what they're saying based on the idea that they're trying to convey over there.
Right.
So like in terms of the idea that they're trying to convey over there versus a contradictory idea that like the Gemara, let's say, says or whatever. How do you reconcile?
Right. So let's play it through both of the stories. So in the story of the ovens of Achnai, which is a halakhic area, so then the Bas Kol was not adding anything other than like presumably I forgot who was involved in the debate, but whoever was it Rabbi Eliezer, I think Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, whoever it was. Presumably they already had their debates about Svara, and Rabbi Eliezer tried to explain to them what his Svara was. And as is the case with many machlokim among like Chazal, you usually have the one most abstract thinker and everyone else. And, and he can't persuade them because he's thinking on such a more abstract level. So there, the Bas Kol was just like saying, yeah, he's right. But the Bas Kol, unless the Bas Kol can supply if the Bas Kol supplied some new line of reasoning, and then they took that new line of reasoning into account and like debated it and said, okay, yeah, we see your point now, that would be a different story, But the stamp of approval itself is nothing. Now, in the case of the Elisha ben Avuya, that's another interesting thing where like the Bas Kol is just, again, in my understanding of the story, the Bas Kol is just saying, yeah, Elisha ben Avuya is beyond the point of tshuva, but like we have a principle based on bechira, based on like tshuva stems from bechira, that you can change who you are based on the tshuva process. And everything we know about tshuva, again, I can't point to a specific pasuk in the Torah, is that change is always available, and like no matter what, So if someone is telling you like like you can't do tshuva, like that again is just an authority-based thing. Like I suppose if the Bas Kol could like show you like that you somehow lack the mechanism of tshuva, maybe then like that might change your mind, but like you don't abandon your whole view of human nature based on the authoritative voice of the Bas Kol. Yeah.
Okay. For me, I'm not entirely sure of the differentiation of authority, right? Meaning the Torah has authority,
right?
And that authority comes from God,
yeah,
right? And a Bas Kol has authority, and presumably that authority also comes from God, right? So now, in a sense, you have two of the same authorities contradicting each other.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
So
you have God Bas Kol, and then God emanation through Torah.
Yeah.
Torah being something which is having some human involvement being passed out like Masorah. Right?
Yeah.
So essentially you have, for me, what I'm hearing is that you have Masorah, and then you have Bas Kol, which is also in a sense God coming and contradicting or working against the Masorah.
Right.
And then you say that the Masorah holds, in that the Masorah is whatever is understandable to the masses.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever the majority
of the Sanhedrin
can understand and comprehend.
Yeah.
And therefore are able to then transmit.
Yeah.
Right. Meaning you cannot have, for me, even if a Bas Kol says that the halacha is a certain way or the idea is a certain way. Right?
Yeah.
If you can't transmit that idea, right? So then that could be fundamental failing of that idea, even if it is the more true idea.
So I think I'm thinking about this in different categories than you are. And I'm not saying that the way you're thinking about it is invalid, but just to clarify what I think he means is, and my own understanding is, it's not just a simple thing of two authorities, the Torah's authority and the Bas Kol's authority. That's what I was trying to get across with the analogy with science, that when you have a scientist who says a theory is not on the same level as the actual facts, the actual data that you're working with, because no amount of theorizing can override the data,
And what is facts in this?
So in this case, I think I actually made a diagram. We'll just see if it helps.
think I wanted the
How
question.
science works. Yeah, I know.
I tried.
Okay,
Well,
let's see if this helps.
this is great.
Yeah, I mean,
How do you make diagrams?
with my mind. Yeah. Okay. So in
The senses.
yeah. So okay. So this is by science. Okay. So with science, you have the senses and the mind. Oh wait, am I not sharing the screen? I'm not sharing the screen. Hold on.
I think that's the question.
I don't read the chat. Yeah. Okay. I'll read it later. All right. Oops. Hold on. Did I just? Yeah. I'm sharing the screen.
Yeah, you
Right.
got
Okay.
it.
Yeah. All right. Hold on.
What's going on?
I don't know what's going on here. Okay. Here we go. All right. So let's see if I can understand what this chart means. Okay. You've got the senses and the mind. Okay. That's the basis of everything. Okay. And they have to work in conjunction with each other because, like the classic example, I forgot if this is a Pesach example or the train example, train tracks. Yeah, right. Is you have train tracks which are parallel. Now, if you just relied on the senses, you would think that the train tracks meet at a certain point, but your mind tells you that that's not a property of parallel lines. You know, that parallel lines don't meet. So then you say, okay, I know that in this case, I have to modify what I'm seeing based on what my mind says, you know? And similarly, like if you don't have good vision, right? So, you know, if I look and I see that Chaim Zifkin doesn't have any eyes, you know, if I look through without my glasses, I know that I have bad vision and that my senses are not reliable in that case, you know? So I have to do that. Fine. So you start with the senses in the mind, then you engage in scientific thinking, which read Rav Pesach's essay about what scientific thinking is, you know, whatever that is. Scientific thinking that causes you to then seek more empirical data, which then leads to a theory. Okay, now if you have a theory, so then what happens is you are constantly in science pushing forward by seeking new empirical data, because unlike Torah, which we'll see in a second, with science, you never know that you have all the data. There's always a possibility that you're going to get more data, and that data is going to lead to new questions and difficulties. Okay. Similarly, you're always pushing forward in conceptual understanding. It's possible that your theory is flawed, and that a problem in the theory will lead to new questions and understanding. And then what eventually happens is that leads to a revision of the theory, which then prompts you to seek new data and new conceptual understanding, and then it goes in an eternal cycle. And you're constantly pushing up against the horizon of ignorance, meaning you're getting more and more closer to the truth, but you can never fully say that you've gotten there because you don't really know. Okay, and let me just read what I wrote here and see if this helps. Questions and difficulties compel us to modify or eliminate the very scientific theories which yielded them in the first place, thereby continuing the life cycle of scientific understanding. Although these questions and difficulties will force us to reject particular scientific theories, they do not cause us to doubt or deny the general approach of scientific thinking as a whole, right? Scientific thinking is what we use no matter what. Okay, now compare this to Torah. Again, this is a whole article, so if you want to read it, it's probably clearer than me remembering it. When did I write this? I wrote this in 2017. It's not so long ago, but long enough.
Like there was.
Oh, that was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Isn't that what we just did?
No, yeah, Torah.
Oh, no, you're right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here you have the mind and the senses, which is the basis for us accepting the revelation at Sinai. Once we accept the revelation at Sinai, that we see God communicating to Moshe, that vouches for all the contents of Torah. Right, that's why we accept the psukim of Torah, because we see that God is speaking to Moshe and chose him as his trusted servant, and that everything in Torah B'chsav and Torah B'al Peh that Moshe got is mipia gevura, is from God. Okay, that we filter through the thought through rational and scientific thinking, right, which is halakhic thought, philosophical thought, whatever, and then we come up with Torah theories. Okay, so again, just like in science, like you can never get the absolute truth unless you are in the mind of God. So too with Torah, the only person who knew all of Torah completely and perfectly is Moshe Rabbeinu. What we do is we have models of ideas in Torah that we're constantly trying to approach, to push back the reality of the horizon of ignorance and approach reality. But it's a similar process that you have a certain working theory in Torah. Let's say you're trying to theorize about how Skar V'Onish works, or how Nevuah works, or like what a mitzvah is, or like what the purpose of Shatnez is. You know, you have a theory, and what you're doing is you're not getting any new contents from Torah, right? I mean, theoretically, all of that is already out there. I mean, it might be new to you, so functionally speaking, it'll be new, but new understanding of the Torah's contents, and then a conceptual understanding of that. That's not so clear. I probably explained it in the thing. That leads to new questions and difficulties. Then that causes you to modify your Torah theories. So I'll just read this here, and then we'll come back to our topic. Questions and difficulties compel us to modify or eliminate parts of our theoretical understanding of Torah and its contents. Although these questions and difficulties will force us to reject particular Torah theories, they do not cause us to doubt or deny the basis of the revelation at Sinai or the veracity of its content. Now, this is the whole reason I brought up the chart, which is like this. The difference between a pasuk or a Torah Sheba'al Peh data point and a Bas Kol is that a pasuk is really part of the contents of Torah itself, which rests on the revelation of Sinai, which rests on the foundation of the mind and the senses. But a Bas Kol is just going to be suggesting a new Torah theory. Now, it might be a Torah theory that is vouched for by God, so to speak. But again, that's not really in halacha. We say lo b'shmayim hi. Halacha does not go based on authority. Halacha goes based on the mind's understanding of the contents of Torah and on the halachic psak mechanism of Achrei Rabim Lahatos. So that's why we ignore the Bas Kol in the case of halachic psak, halachic interference. And then the reason why we would ignore the Bas Kol in the realm of, let's call it philosophy, okay, is like with Elisha ben Avuya, saying you can't do tshuva, is that that you don't accept something just because someone says that it's the case. Like when it comes to philosophy, you can only accept ideas that you believe. Like otherwise, you're not accepting the ideas. You're accepting like words. I know you have a question. I just want to, since we're on this, I just want to, clarification.
Yeah. So can I add in actually a line to the diagram?
Sure. And by the way, I might revise this diagram.
Okay.
This is like 5 years ago. It's outdated already.
You have Torah theories.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have Torah practice.
Right.
Which is
Okay.
what I would call halacha. Okay. Just like in science, you have scientific theories and then you have scientific practice, right? So we have this theory about the mind or the body or whatever, and therefore we prescribe this medication or this treatment plan, or we do these actions, right? Or we use the Ptolemaic system or the Copernican system or whatever. We create systems that we use to then prescribe and use to differentiate how we interact with the world. Yeah. And so I would call that halacha. Yeah. And then I would call the contents of Torah and or Torah theories and halachic practice are kind of halacha brackets, and then contents of Torah is more like a fundamental Torah of the
Yeah. Okay. So I think this might warrant a new diagram. Let me hold on a second. This works because I think what I did is I deliberately excluded halacha here. In this, hold on just a second here.
Because I think people use Torah and halacha synonymously. And
I think
me, they're not exactly the same.
I think that definitely merits a modification of the chart, and I did not incorporate it into the chart, but that's a good. And I think it bears more thought because there are certain intersections. I think. Oren.
Okay, with the halachic Bas Kol case or example, didn't you say that halacha doesn't need to record by your thoughts, like you said, if God tells you to do X, if God tells you to jump, you say how high. Yeah. So if the Bas Kol tells you to do something, even if that goes against some svara that you have, then why does that matter? Because
then why is that? Because the Bas Kol is we don't lo b'shmayim hi. We don't accept halacha.
Okay, why?
That's what the Torah says, and that's a halacha.
What does the Torah say about it?
It says it in. I'll show you. Hold on. Let me share the screen. Let's see here. Lo bashamayim bashamayim. Yeah. Okay, let me find the actual thing. So in Devarim Lamed Yud Beis, but I'm going to show you the actual memra of Chazal. Okay, so it says, this is talking about Torah, and it says, Lo b'shmayim hi lemor mi alelan hashmayim v'yikacha halana v'yashmi'ena osav na'asena. The Torah is not in heaven, such that you would say, who will ascend up to the heavens and take it for us and make us understand it that we will do it. And so I bet the Torah Tamima brings down the, hold on a second, let me just close this. Torah Tamima, trusty Torah Tamima. Yeah, there we go. Lo b'shmayim hi, my lo b'shmayim hi. What does lo b'shmayim hi mean? Rabbi Yirmiyah shekvar nitna Torah mehar Sinai ve'inanu mashgichim b'Bas Kol. This is in Bava Metzia, that the Torah was already given from heaven, and we don't pay attention to a Bas Kol. And And that's that story. Let's see. So he towards me references the story. That's talking about we don't listen to a Bas Kol to paskin like a minority vis-a-vis the majority. I'm just going to read and see if this helps us. Kan amru ein mashgichim b'Bas Kol shekvar ksiv b'Torah achri Rabbi Lahatos. So that's what I was saying earlier. We don't listen to the Torah to Bas Kol because it's already written in the Torah. You go after the majority in a Sanhedrin. V'amnam nira delav davka ki yachid neged Rabim ela afilu ki yachid neged yachid ein Bas Kol machras. So even though the case there was one individual versus the many, you don't even listen to Bas Kol when it's two people. Kevin to b'chlal inyan divrei Torah lo b'shmayim hi. Because it's included in the concept of the Torah is not in heaven. The only reason it brought Achri Rabim Lahatos is because that was the case there. Yeah. And this is the same, he's going to go on and say that's the same reason we don't listen to a Navi Sheker. Because the Torah already tells us how to deal with a Navi. So even if a guy does miracles and says that I'm a Navi, we don't go against the halachos that we know are in Torah, which tell us how to deal with the Navi. Yeah. All right. Isaac had a question that you typed in. Let me just read it now. Okay. So if a Bas Kol says you can't do tshuva, why wouldn't you assume it has insight about your nature that you just don't understand? I mean, certainly to think about it would be fine, but again, let's take Rabbi Moskowitz's premise that everyone could do tshuva from the Torah. And again, Rambam says that explicitly, but I just don't know offhand what the Rambam source is. I'm going to go with a understanding of human nature based on the data of Torah over I'll give you an example. Let's say let's say you had something definitive in Torah. Okay, and I don't, whatever you want to say. Let's say you have something definitive in Torah that says something about human nature, and then you have some sort of no, I want to think about this example before I give it. Yeah. I don't know the answer. What do you think?
What was the question?
The question was, if a Bas Kol says you can't do teshuva, why wouldn't you assume that it has insight about your nature that you just don't understand? I mean, the first step I can take, you might assume it has insight about human nature, but if it's like the way that the Rambam says, okay, I'll give you an example, actually. Here, this is a good example in Hilchos Yesodei Torah, right? So this is a good analogy. We get to use a good Rambam. Is this ever going to not excite me? I don't think so.
It just seems a little, I don't know, a little vicious.
A little vicious to what?
Meaning like a Bas Kol will tell you, oh, you don't do tshuva because
for the Bas Kol to say that it's vicious?
It's like, well, what about free will? What about, it's almost like telling you
right.
Yeah, well, he was a different case. I don't know that, but it's like, well, it is like the system of Torah allows you to do that. I mean, you're just supposed to look into it for yourself.
I'm just saying, I'm going to call it back. Okay. So this is in Hilchos Yesodei Torah chapter 8 when he's talking about why we accept Nevuos Moshe and Torah Sinai. So he says, so when he goes over how do we know that at the event at Har Sinai alone, that was the proof for Moshe's Nevuah, that it's true and that there's without a doubt. It says in Shemos, Hashem says to Moshe, behold, I will come to you in the thickness of a cloud, in order that the people will hear me speak with you, and also in you they will believe forever. It implies that before then they did not believe in Moshe with a belief that would last forever. It was a belief that had some sort of doubt afterwards. And so it turns out that the people who Moshe was sent to, meaning the Klal Yisrael who were witnesses, they are the witnesses that Moshe's nevuah is true. And he didn't need to do a sign. They and he were one in the matter. So this is the analogy I'm going to borrow. It's like two witnesses who see something together. Okay, we both see something. Each one is a witness to his fellow that he is speaking truthfully. and none of them needs to bring a proof for his fellow because they both saw it together. So too, all of Israel were witnesses at Har Sinai, and they don't need anyone else to bring another proof. Hold on, is that the one that I wanted, or is it the second one? When he reiterates the analogy. Oh yeah, so he reiterates this analogy when another Navi comes and does miracles and wonders. Why don't we accept that Navi? So Nim says Omer, Shekol Navi Shiamod Achar Moshe Rabbeinu, any Navi who comes after Moshe, in Anu Ma'aminim Bo Mipnei Ha'os Levado. We don't believe him based on the sign alone. K'dei Shenomar Im Yaseh Os Nishmalo, meaning we don't say that if he does a miracle, we'll believe him, B'chol Mash Yomar, whatever he says. Ella, why do we accept any Navi? Mipnei HaMitzvah Shetzivanu Moshe B'Torah. Only based on the mitzvah that Moshe Rabbeinu says in the Torah, meaning if this Navi who claims Nevuah conforms to the halachic tests for Nevuah that we got from Moshe, then we believe him. If he gives a sign that conforms to those witnesses, to those halachos, then we listen to him. Just like we are commanded to decide a matter based on two witnesses. Even though we don't know whether they are true, testifying truly or falsly. So too, it's a mitzvah to listen to this Navi. Whether the sign is true or whether it's through trickery. Okay, so in other words, like this. Let's say you have a premise here that Torah says anyone can do tshuva. Okay, then you have a Bas Kol that says you can't do tshuva, right? So Isaac's question is, why don't we assume that there's insight in that Bas Kol into human nature? So I'm saying you essentially witnessed the reality that that all human beings can do tshuva. So accepting this Bas Kol, it's a very nice theory that you can't do tshuva, but I'm not going to deny my whole foundation of human nature because of something. Fine. So I have a question on the Bas Kol. I don't know what the Bas Kol means, but I'm not going to deny what I accept based on Torah Sinai based on that. Right. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Okay.
And it's also interesting because the Gemara says lo b'shamayim. We never said lo b'davar shamayim. Whatever. Yeah.
That's what it means though. Because it means lo b'shamayim.
Yeah. Because lo b'shamayim all it really means is the authority. But if the idea itself is good.
Yeah, right. But then you're not accepting it based on the Shemayim. You're accepting it based on the idea. Right. It's like the Rambam says at the end of Kiddush HaChodesh. This one I don't know how to find, so I have to look it up.
So I guess the question is if who's that guy?
Elisha ben Avuya.
Elisha ben Avuya. If he just held there's an authority that says I can't do tshuva and he followed by authority, then that's a big problem. But what if he actually looked into the svaras and between one versus the other?
Right. I mean, if his mind told him, what I would say is if his mind told him that he can't do tshuva, and then and if the Torah really does say that everyone could do tshuva, then I would question my own mind. That's the other. It's in the same parsha actually. Hold on, let's go back. It's in the same parsha about how to approach something in Torah that you don't understand. Hold on. I feel like I quoted this last Q&A.
The last Q&A was about how to convey something to you guy.
It's in the same parsha. Yeah, kilo davar reku mikem. That the song again talking about Torah, saying it is not an empty matter. Kilo davar reku mikem. It is not an empty matter from you. So the Gemara in Yerushalmi says, Amar Rabbi Mana. Kilo davar reku, it is not an empty matter of im reku mikemhu, and if it's empty, it's from you. So in other words, if the Torah says, and again, I realize that there's a lot of question, what do you include in what I mean by Torah in this case? If the Torah says everyone can do tshuva and you think you can't, assume that the deficiency is coming from your understanding and you're misunderstanding something in Torah, Yeah. Okay, I actually have to go now, but unless there's any last minute questions on this matter. Yeah.
Not really a question, but
sure.
Something I took from this.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. But when the Rambam
don't listen to me. No.
When the Rambam talks about the Hilchos Tshuva, that someone going against the will of God, it can make the excuse that God wants there to be I'm sorry. Before that, that basically the nature of God's will, in a sense, is that man has free will.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds like what we're talking about here, that like you should follow your mind, because that's really what you're supposed to be doing as a human being. I
Right.
mean, obviously, again, we said like halacha, like you should still follow the halacha,
Yeah.
and whatever. But as far as like the ideas, you shouldn't just say, I'm gonna go do it. You
Yeah.
should follow your free will, and I mean, try to understand it. But
Yeah, it is exactly. You gotta live by your mind. And again, just to reiterate here, I mean, easiest way to see this quality of Rabbi Moskowitz, since you can't actually see it, is ask yourself, okay, picture a case where you are convinced of something, okay, and it makes sense to you and it's crystal clear, okay, and then someone quotes to you an authority whose mind you respect and says the contrary, okay, so whether it's rebbi, Rabbi Ginsburg, whoever it is, and think about, there's an internal flinch that you experience. Okay, now there is a healthy flinch and then there's an unhealthy flinch. The healthy flinch is, oh, this other chacham says something, I should re-examine what I'm saying, right? Okay, that's the healthy flinch, because you should examine, you should learn from chachamim, right? But the unhealthy flinch is if somehow the fact that they said it like affects your conviction in the clarity of your mind, simply from the fact that the authority doesn't accord with what you're saying. In other words, the authority should be the quoting that authority should be a window to then examine the issue, and then the clarity of the issue should persuade you, But if it's just the fact that some authority says it and you don't see it clear, or if you want the easier case, let's say the authority doesn't make sense, the way Chazal say, I don't care if Yehoshua ben Nun said it, I wouldn't believe it, Ask yourself if you're capable of, and again, I'm saying where you've heard out what this person says, and and you respect their authority, and again, I'll give you I've quoted this example many times, is one of the fundamental areas in which I disagree with Rabbi Moskowitz is Rabbi Moskowitz, firmly believed that you should not try to change, right? You should never try to change, okay, yourself. Again, with behavior, like with halacha, whatever, you should keep halacha, but like in terms of your, let's say changing your midos or whatever, he says you should just go over the ideas and go over them clearly again and again and again, and over time the ideas will change you. And I think that that's true, but I think that there are ways to accelerate change, through like habit cultivation and through, practice and through setting up other sorts of things. And I fundamentally disagree with him. And I don't care that Rabbi Moskowitz says that. We've had this discussion many, 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 many times. And I think I understand his position, but I don't accept it. And it doesn't, that's it. Yeah.
And we're saying that there's a distinction between accepting their idea or diluting the validity of your idea based on what they're saying, versus if your Rav tells you to do something, that you should still do the thing, even if it doesn't make sense.
If your Rav tells you something in psak, then you do it even if it doesn't make sense. Right. Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to accept that this makes sense.
Exactly.
You should still be actually doing
exactly. And again, just to pair that with a story that I've heard quoted many times, and I forgot who the guy's name is that Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, who arguably the greatest abstract thinker in his generation, had a posek, right? And there were times when he would ask the posek for psak and say, don't tell me the reasoning, because once you tell me the reasoning, I'm going to start to see all these arguments against it. And then it's going to create conflict, but I just want you to paskin for me, and that will be the halacha, and I'm going to follow it. And I don't, I don't want to hear what are you going to say?
Story.
It's a great story. Yeah.
Just in terms of your spiritual mind, I just want to understand his position. When he says, did he say you shouldn't actively change your behavior, or that it's not necessary to change your behavior?
He would say that you shouldn't. I mean, yeah, and I think the reason why he would say that is I think he held that type of change would often result. So the attempts would often fail, and it's not going to be a real change. And somehow embracing that the only changes that occur through natural chachma is going to lead to a more solid, better change. And I can't deny that he got results from that for himself.
Right, but my question is to your point, what was his response to your point? Meaning you can learn the idea, but at the same time you can use it to help you with it. What was his response?
That's a good question. It's a good question. I'll have to ask my friends. Well, it's been a long time since I've had that debate with him.
That's a really good point. I mean, like,
Yeah.
okay, if he says it's unnecessary,
Yeah.
fine, but to
Right.
shouldn't, it's pretty extreme.
Yeah. I
Right?
mean, one that he was very. I mean, I'll tell you where this came from. Also, is that he was very against making any decisions based on fear, shame, or guilt. And I think because he felt that this type of change that I was advocating for came from the superego, or at least conform to the superego, then it's not going to be lasting. It's going to generate other conflicts, and it's not good. And then I would argue back that, but if you change in behavior, that can facilitate certain other ideas of clarity, like later on, and like we talk a little from a balishma, and we just go around in circles.
No, that's fine. I
Yeah.
hear that, but like in terms of like forget, like let's assume there isn't no super ego involved or no
Yeah.
guilt, whatever. Like you learn Mishlei, right?
Yeah.
You see the idea clearly,
Yeah.
but your personality lends itself to such that like you need to do the activity in order to like further it. Would you agree with that?
That's a good question. Yeah, I got to think about it and talk with people also. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Sorry we didn't do Q&A or Mishlei, but this is on my mind. So okay. Good.
I have a book
I'm
to show you
Okay.
on this.